Good morning, everyone. My name is Mike Norton. I'm a Director General with Natural Resources Canada's Canadian Forest Service from Edmonton. I'll acknowledge that I'm speaking today from the traditional territory of Treaty 6. Our thoughts are with the communities and families, of course, being affected on an ongoing basis by these wildfires, and thank first responders who are responding to the fires and supporting those that are affected. I will provide an update today on the seasonal outlook and some additional information on federal actions and investments to help reduce risks from fires building from the ministerial event that was held last week. If you're following along with the deck that was distributed, I'll move along to the second slide. Wildfires are Canada's second most costly disaster after flooding. The national cost just for the direct expense of fire suppression is around $1 billion a year and rising. And that figure does not include costs related to structural losses, economic disruption, or human health impacts. Climate change is increasing the frequency and intensity of wildland fires and creating longer fire seasons in Canada. Historical averages are increasingly not reflective of what we might see in the future, and that is why the word unprecedented is being increasingly used. Depuis les années 1970,
since the 1970s, the area burned annually by forest fires has more than doubled, and it is predicted that by 2100, the area burned could double again. The semi-urban boundary is where our infrastructure and forests meet. This is where forest fires can do the most damage. About 80% of indigenous communities are found in forested area, and they are 18 times more likely to be evacuated in the case of a forest fire.
On to slide 3. Wildland fire preparedness and response is a responsibility shared primarily between provincial, territorial, and federal governments. Provincial and territorial wildfire agencies have their own tools and capabilities and main responsibility for fire management within their jurisdictions. The Government of Canada supports fire management through national emergency management and coordination, providing scientific and technical expertise and decision support tools, negotiating international agreements for wildfire resource sharing, and of course, managing fires on federal lands. This is a whole of government undertaking to support the current situation. You can find details on departmental roles in the annex to the slide. The Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Centre is a non-profit organization owned and operated by the federal, provincial, and territorial governments that works to support fire agencies in several ways, particularly by coordinating the exchange of firefighting personnel and equipment domestically and internationally. I should note that indigenous, municipal, and regional governments and their associated fire services have a critical role in responding to fires that directly impact communities. Slide 4. There's a chart here that represents cumulative area burned by year, estimated from satellite detected hotspots. Several features I'll point out. First, it shows that this year we are experiencing an unprecedented amount of fire for this early in the season. Second, the rate of increase of area burned is also high. You can see other years with very rapid rates of increase, including 2021, for example, but not this early in the year. If this rate continues, we could hit record levels for area burned this year. Third, this chart also shows that there is an overall trend for fire activity over the course of the fire season. Early spring fires, and then another increase in fires starting midsummer. Finally, you can see high variability in area burned and timing between years, and it is important to remember that the potential for large or damaging fire always exists, even during average fire seasons or under average conditions. Slide 5. Hier soir, le 4 juin, il y avait...
Last night, June 4th, there were 413 active fires nationwide, and of these, 249 are classified as out of control. The situation is constantly evolving and numbers change every hour. Currently, Quebec is facing the highest level of pressure due to multiple fires that have been ignited by lightning. The distribution of fires from coast to coast this year is unusual. At this time of the year, fires usually occur only on one side of the country at a time, most often that being in the west. Most fires tend to break out in the north, far from major urban areas, putting rural and isolated communities at risk.
6. As of June 4th, we have experienced 2,114 fires nationally, burning close now to 3.3 million hectares of forest, and these numbers will change again today. As mentioned, this is an unprecedented number for this early in the year. Evacuations have been widespread, occurring in 9 provinces and territories already. At some point, we are now over 100,000 people that have been affected by evacuations at some point since fires began in early May. Canada's ability to fight wildland fires is exceptional and well respected around the world. Our provincial and territorial fire agencies, as well as Parks Canada and NRCan, work seamlessly together through the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Centre to ensure personnel and equipment are mobilized on a priority basis to where risks are greatest. All countries, including Canada, rely on assistance from our international partners to meet demands. The United States has been a partner for decades, and in more recent years, anticipating the need for more international assistance, we have negotiated agreements with 5 additional countries. We are leveraging those agreements now, and our partners are answering our call. There are currently over 950 international firefighters and related management and support personnel currently in Canada from the United States, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa. Crews from Costa Rica will arrive soon. There are 177 more personnel scheduled to arrive this week, and over 300 more under discussion possibly this week and next. And we are exploring the potential for additional assistance should we need it. I just reviewed the international numbers. This does not reflect the total number of firefighters active on the ground in Canada. On slide 7, I'll move along to a brief update on the outlook for the rest of the season. From March to September, NRCan generates monthly forecast maps at the beginning of each month. These seasonal forecasts use the most recent fire weather indexes and consider drought conditions and temperature and precipitation forecasts derived from modeling completed by Environment and Climate Change Canada. As you can see, current projections include the potential for ongoing higher than normal fire activity across most of the country. For June, as shown on the map, warm and dry conditions will increase wildfire risk in most of Canada from British Columbia and Yukon eastward into Quebec and Atlantic Canada. On the map, the light red shows an above average risk and the dark red reflects well above average risk. So the risk of forest fires is going to remain very high. On slide 8, la situation reste globalement.
The situation remains broadly unchanged in July and August, with a decrease in fire risk in a large part of Canada. When looking at these maps, it's important to remember that the long-term outlook for forest fire activity is difficult to predict, and that uncertainty increases as we look forward into the future. In addition, monthly forecasts cannot predict specific fire activity in any given month. But on the other hand, fires only are declared if they are ignited. We need to reduce the number of fires that are accidentally started, and many regions have imposed fire bans and forest access restrictions to this end.
Slide 9. The Government of Canada has made a number of important investments over recent years to build capacity to respond to wildfires and to ultimately increase our resilience to fire. We are modernizing our information systems and key decision support tools. Investments have been made in emergency management and in our strategic understanding of wildfire risk and capabilities. A reminder of the national risk profile that was released earlier this month. We have taken steps to strengthen emergency management capacity in First Nations communities. Parks Canada itself operates a full fire management program, and its capacity has been significantly strengthened. Parks Canada has already been able to assist provinces with firefighting this year. We are currently investing $346 million to help provinces and territories purchase wildland firefighting equipment and to train 1,000 community-based wildland firefighters. Additionally, since 2018, the Government of Canada has invested $3.4 billion through the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund to help make communities more resilient to natural disasters. Finally, we are continuously collaborating with partners. The Canadian Council of Forest Ministers is a key venue. And just last year, the Council convened a series of roundtables with 100 partner organizations to seek advice and mobilize action on wildfire risk reduction. Slide 10, I will briefly touch on some recently announced investments that will further build capacity. Wildfire Sat will be the world's first purpose-built operational satellite system for monitoring wildfires. The Wildfire Resilient Futures Initiative is part of the Government of Canada's Adaptation Action Plan. It will focus on expanding the FireSmart Canada program. FireSmart does not eliminate risk, but we know that it works to reduce risks. That initiative will also further strengthen the scientific foundations of fire risk reduction and establish an international center of excellence in wildland fire innovation and resilience. We expect to launch that program later this year. And finally, the Disaster Mitigation Adaptation Fund will be further strengthened. On my last slide, to conclude, wildland fires are inevitable in Canada, but climate change is making the challenge more serious. Fire suppression will always be essential, and we have the know-how to meet that challenge. However, fire suppression alone is no longer adequate. We must take proactive steps to prepare for wildfires and to reduce risks before they occur. Collaboration between federal, provincial, and territorial partners on this issue is stronger than ever. And I've reviewed several ways in which the Government of Canada is investing toward exactly that shared outcome. The desired future is one of resilience, where all sectors of society are aware and engaged, prepared to respond to fires when they occur, actively working to prevent unwanted fires, and proactively mitigating risks before fires occur. Those are my remarks. Thank you. Merci.
Was there anyone else, any other government officials who were making remarks, or can we go to Q&A?
I think we can go straight to Q&A, please.
All right, so we'll start with questions in the room. The first question will go to Michael Saba with La Presse Canadienne.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Norton.
Yes, hello, Mr. Norton. You said that the level of fire activity is unprecedented and the risk will remain high in July and August throughout the country. So this is a very long period of high risk. Is this never seen before?
Merci beaucoup pour cette question.
Thank you very much for the question. I'm going to ask Yan Boulanger to answer it.
Oui, bonjour tout le monde.
Yes, hello everyone. Yan Boulanger. I'm a researcher at RNCAN. So to answer your question, we do see an increase in the number of fires and the burned area since the beginning of the year. Over the last 20 years, we have never seen such a large area burned so early in the season. And this is partially because of climate change. We're seeing trends towards increasing this burned area throughout Canada. And the fire season is becoming longer. And so this type of situation will probably occur more and more often because of climate change.
Okay, seeing no follow-up, we'll go to Ashley Burke at CBC.
Mr. Norton, I'm hoping you can talk about the role that the Canadian Armed Forces play. Right now, I know that there are some Canadian Armed Forces firefighters, but my understanding is that other people are getting training. Is there, training that's happening for all military members, like basic training, so they're prepared to do this, or is it taking several days to train them up before they go? And are there any conversations about doing more training so they are able to respond faster?
Thank you. I think best placed would be my colleague Deryck Trehearne from the Government Operations Centre to take that question, please.
Sorry.
We had sound from you there, Deryck.
Did you? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, it's telling me I'm in a death spiral on Zoom here, but I'll talk anyway. So the question was about the CAF. So I would say a few things. One, the CAF has as part of its mandate, supporting emergencies in Canada. That's what they call op lentis. And to speak specifically to the firefighting training, there's certainly 150 CAF members being trained in Quebec. There were 150 being trained in Nova Scotia, many of which are deployed already. CAF has training in basic firefighting, which we call Tier 3 firefighting, which the expert can speak to. But in general, they do have that. They have a preponderance of that in the West, which is exactly what we're seeing, as Mike has pointed out. Most times these kinds of fires are happening in the West, not so much Central and East at this time of year. And so the CAF training, I think, reflects a little bit of that. But they are actually able to rapidly train folks up. It takes about 4 or 5 days. And they typically train with the provinces of note, which is what's happening avec Upfeu at Quebec. Upfeu, oui, c'est ça.
So in Quebec with UPFA, it's a similar thing happening?
Scotia Fire Service there last week. So they are able to train up, but in terms of like general training of the entire armed forces domestically, I don't think so. I think it's more regional specific, but we can always come back with an answer on that if needed. Thanks.
And are there any conversations about asking the Canadian Armed Forces to train up more individuals so they're ready to respond quickly? I know with the case in Nova Scotia, the Minister Blair last week had hoped that the Canadian Armed Forces would be on the ground by Thursday. They just arrived today because it took several days for that training to happen. And on the ground, there's criticism that it took too long. The worst of it's over there. So are there any conversations in light of what you're seeing right now about having the military already trained up, ready to go in more areas of the country?
Yeah, I think there's a general conversation going on about that. And the CAF, I don't think, is on the line, so they can't really speak to it about current events. But when we approved the RFA for Nova Scotia, which we did in less than 24 hours, the CAF did begin their deployment, but they were very clear. And Nova Scotia was very satisfied, frankly, with the idea that they would be trained up over 4 or 5 days, given the fact that Nova Scotia has firefighters on the ground. There's currently 400 or 500 people there domestically between Nova Scotia and PEI. There's, as Mike pointed out, there's I think about 20 or 30 Americans there, plus more on the way, plus Costa Ricans as well. So Nova Scotia was looking at those CAF folks as backup and respite to the actual firefighters. And so they were quite satisfied with the 4 to 5 day training as we understood it. And that was part of the plan. Also, we should point out that the CAF firefighters obviously are Tier 3. They're not specialists here. They are backup, they are mop up, and they are general firefighting duties. So they don't go into fight at the pointy end of the stick, as it were, anyway. So I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. And next question goes to David Thurton with CBC News.
Hi. My understanding is that this whole briefing is embargoed until the Prime Minister speaks, but it's all on the record. And correct me if I'm wrong if I'm with that. But my real question is, how many wildland firefighters, Canadian wildland firefighters, do we have in this country?
Yeah, thanks for that question. At a national level, we actually don't track the question. Firefighting is primarily a responsibility at the provincial territorial level. I can give order of magnitude, would say sort of 3,000 plus would be a best estimate, but we actually don't have a specific number based on where the roles and responsibilities for wildland firefighting specifically lie.
So we have about 3,000 wildland firefighters. Am I hearing you? Just at the provincial and territorial levels, okay? And correct me if I'm wrong with that. But my follow-up now is, I understand climate change is making the situation worse, but is there anything happening in our weather? Is it La Nina, or something like that that's causing this season to be incredibly bad? And what does the outlook look for other countries that also are going through summers and typically have wildfires? And the reason I'm asking that is because we're pulling their resources. What happens if they need these international wildland firefighters or firefighters back? So if you give me a sense beyond climate change, why this season is really bad, and what the outlook looks like for the rest of the hemisphere?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. What I will invite, Richard Carr is on the line. He is our fire danger forecasting expert. I'll ask Richard to take the first part of that question, and then I'll supplement a little bit on the second part of your question. Richard?
All right, thanks. Happy to answer part of the question. This year we've had a La Nina that is starting to fade out, and the La Nina actually favors dry Arctic air moving into central Canada, and we've seen that over and over again. But I think with the changing El Nino Southern Oscillation Index, and so we've actually been getting kind of the worst of both La Nina and an incoming El Nino, which is starting to develop over the summer. So we've had a bit more heat than we've had during a typical La Nina spring, but it does tend to favor very windy, dry conditions. Previously, the most area burned was in 1989, and the ENSO index did very much the same thing that year. So I wouldn't be surprised if weather conditions are very similar to what we had in, 1989.
Thanks, Richard. On the part of the question about international, so fire seasons in the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere are opposite each other, effectively, the reversal of seasons in the South. So our international arrangements that we have, obviously, the Americans are a key partner for us. Their fire season is roughly at the same time of year as us, which is why we have negotiated over the last year's arrangements with Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa that have fire seasons at other times of year, so that they are able to assist us when we need, and vice versa. We have gone to help in Australia in bad fire seasons. Mexico as well is another important partner of ours. Their fire season their normal fire season is just kind of wrapping up right now, so that we don't see any Mexicans in Canada right now, but we do expect that in a month's time or so, if we need them, that things will have quieted down in Mexico, and we would be able to ask some Mexicans to come and assist. So this international interplay of resource sharing is how the system is designed. All countries, as I said, kind of depend on each other for surge capacity when required, and resources are shared between countries when fire conditions in one country allow them to export to another country that has a time of need.
Okay, seeing no more questions in the room, we'll go to the virtual folks on the line. Valerie Michaela Bain with Radio Canada.
Bonjour, je voulais savoir.
Hello. You mentioned that there are 190 Canadian firefighters on the ground. Is that the correct number, 190?
Effectivement, c'est juste environ 200.
So it's around 200 Canadians that are deployed from one province to another. The actual number on the ground, though, is a lot higher. Okay, could you give me an idea of how many resources we have used up and how much we have left, seeing as we have called upon a lot of international firefighters, about 950, and there's 200 Canadian firefighters on the ground? I've understood that we could call upon more international firefighters, but are we here in Canada limited in our numbers?
There is a, je vais répondre en anglais.
I'll answer in English.
There is obviously a finite number of firefighters that exist in Canada. But as I said, the whole system of wildland firefighting within Canada and internationally is based on an assumption of mutual aid at times of high demand. So at this point, all provinces and territories have staffed up fully for the summer season and have maximum capacity available right now, and they are largely focused within their own provinces. So the the number, I believe, is 198 Canadians who are currently deployed to another province. That number is relatively low, reflecting that most provinces and territories need their firefighters in their own jurisdictions, and the international firefighting, for sure, the number is high this year, but the system is built around doing these kinds of exchanges internationally. We've spoken to the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Centre on a regular basis. They remain confident that we will be able to maintain a sufficient supply of firefighters to meet the most critical needs that we anticipate currently and into the future this season.
Our next question is from Steve McKinley with the Toronto Star.
Hi, sorry about that. Steve McKinley from the Star. Do we have any kind of numerical breakdown of how many firefighters are being sent from each country, from Australia, from New Zealand, from Costa Rica?
Yes, those numbers exist. I don't know that I could quote them all off the cuff, but I do have those numbers. I see Deryck coming back online. Deryck, do you have those numbers right at your fingertips? No, maybe no sound issues. Give me a second. Sorry, I might need to follow up on those. Those numbers do exist. I just don't think I can lay my fingers on them live.
That'd be great. Just as a follow-up, do the firefighters coming from other countries, do they have the same training as ours, or is there a training period that they need to have?
I mean, in general terms, the countries with whom we have agreements, those agreements are the product of years of collaboration to ensure, in fact, that the training systems and incident management control systems are sufficiently similar to allow seamless integration of international crews into Canada. So broadly speaking, we know that these folks that are coming in are trained to a sufficiently similar level and are used to operating in a sufficiently similar system to integrate very well. As we continue to push forward discussions with other countries, that is exactly the kind of background work that we do with each country to ensure intercompatibility or interoperability of our wildland fire fighting systems.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to Jillian Piper with Global News.
Hi there, are you able to hear me?
Yep, we're able to hear you.
Fantastic. As you mentioned, you're looking to find some agreements with other countries moving forward. What other countries are sort of on the radar there? Can you give us any indication?
Yeah, I don't want to get too far ahead of negotiations and commit other countries before they're ready to commit. But given news recently, the president of France has communicated an intent to send some French crews over. France is a country with whom we don't yet have an agreement, but we've been working with France for quite some time. There are a handful of other countries where negotiations are ongoing. I'll say sort of broadly Europe and Southern Hemisphere as well, but to avoid unfairly pressuring those other countries, we may not get ahead of the negotiations.
Totally understandable. And as a follow-up, what sort of advice are you giving Canadians as they're sort of preparing to go into this summer season? You know, those are maybe who are on even on First Nations communities that you're saying are more impacted. What does the approach look like for them? And specifically for First Nations peoples, is there adequate support for them available given that they are at increased risk?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. I mean, the first thing that all Canadians should be aware of is the forecast that we've put out today. The risk of fire throughout the season is going to be high, pretty much across the country. Awareness of that fact is the first step. The second is extreme care in forested or wildland areas to avoid starting fires that we don't want, whether that's anything from a cigarette butt to an all-terrain vehicle. The season will require a very high degree of care to avoid more fires starting. About half of fires in Canada are started from lightning. We can't do much about those, but we can do something about accidental starts by people. And the third thing I would say is that people living in rural or remote areas, in forested landscapes, there are some very simple things, very practical things that can be done to reduce risk and to prepare for the possibility of fire. I would refer people to the Fire Smart Canada program for the guidance, but it includes no-cost things like ensuring that gutters on houses are kept clear of leaves. It means storing firewood and propane tanks away from the home, perhaps clearing a highly flammable vegetation from right up against a wooden deck. These kinds of things that can be done at no cost. There's more costly things that can be done for those that have the ability in terms of sort of building materials and so on. For Indigenous communities and on-reserve communities, Indigenous Services Canada has made some important investments recently in an emergency management assistance program for First Nations. They've also made investments to do some vegetation management to reduce fire risk around communities, and for sure the Government of Canada works through Indigenous Services Canada, works very closely with Indigenous communities to ensure that they have the support they need.
Okay, thank you everybody. I think we'll wrap up this technical briefing.